Hello and welcome to Experience Austin Peay, the podcast dedicated to highlighting why this is the premier university in the region. I'm Charles Booth, Director of Communication. And with this series, we're highlighting the cool and creative things that are going on at Austin Peay. This work forms the basis of Austin Peay's new mission and vision, and we're excited to share that with you. During this first season, which we've called Forgotten Tennessee, we're going to look at some of the mysteries and lost stories of the state. And today we have with us Dr. Meagan Mann, Associate Professor of Chemistry. And since this is October, we're recording this about a little less than a month out from Halloween. So we're going to talk about three things that kind of terrify people: murder, the supernatural, chemistry. So
I was wondering where you were going with that.
You were wondering where I was going with that. Yeah, that's how we sell chemistry here. So specifically, there's the legend of the Bell Witch. Now, if I have a brief little context here for those of you who don't know much about the Bell Witch. 1817, I believe, is when she first appeared on a farm in Adams, Tennessee.
It was called the Red River Settlement at the time. It was not yet Adams, Tennessee, but yes.
Okay, perfect. And a John Bell, who she proceeded to haunt and torture for years, and then ultimately maybe have played a part in his demise.
That's the story.
That story, which
yes.
I grew up in Clarksville. They told us this story in school, which terrified us.
Really?
Because in school, that makes it a real incident. So there really are witches out there in our immediate area. So
yeah.
As an anxious young man, I did not care for that day of school. But you have, as a chemistry professor, you have an interesting sort of connection with the Bell Witch. Can you talk a little bit about that? How did you first find out about this story?
Okay, so I'm a professor, which means when you get a doctorate and then you decide to become a professor and you apply for jobs, you go to where you get hired. Okay, that's how it works. Okay. You don't necessarily get to pick the city. So I landed in this area by chance.
Okay.
I bought a house in 2008 when I moved here in Adams. And so when I got off the highway the very first time to go to my new house, I passed a sign that said the historic Bell Witch Cave, 11 miles that way. And so I thought, I should look into that. And then it turns out that, if you go to Adams, everything there's the Bell Witch. I mean, it's a big deal there. It's a really important case of American folklore. So that's just kind of how I found out about it. I just happened to move to the area and get started on it from there.
Yeah, so I grew up here. My family's from Louisiana. They would come to visit. We would take them to Opryland. And then my mom would always go, "Do you want to go to the Bell Witch Cave?" And I would go, "No, what is wrong with you? There is in the title of this cave is the Bell Witch Cave, but it's a big tourist site."
Yeah.
So, the legend is did she poison Mr. Bell?
Right. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go in on with that. But the legend of the story is that, as you said, in 1817, a family, the Bell family, was living in this Red River Settlement, which is now Adams, Tennessee. And they started to experience some strange things that they couldn't explain. And supposedly, obviously we weren't there to know this, but supposedly it was to the point where the disturbances were so severe and significant that they started to invite people over to see these things. And specifically, this voice, this kind of disembodied voice, supposedly would talk to them in the house. They named her Kate, and there's some history on that one that I won't get into unless anybody's just particularly interested in it, but they called it the Bell Witch because
the Bell family.
The Bell family, and it wasn't actually a witch, it was more of a ghost, like a poltergeist type entity. And she tortured John Bell and his daughter Betsy. They had a really large family, 9 children, I believe.
Wow.
But only a few of them lived here in Tennessee with them. The others were still in North Carolina, where they came from early, like 1804, I think.
They're probably like, "We're okay.
Yeah, we're okay. We're going to stay here.
We're going to stay here," from what I'm hearing of what's going on.
And so they ended up, just this Kate disembodied voice was torturing John and Betsy Bell. And she kept threatening to kill him. I mean, she was like, yeah, John Bell, I'm going to kill you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was like, well, don't. She's like,
please.
No, I'm pretty sure I'm going to kill you till you're dead from it, And so eventually he died, and that was in 1820. So it was the week of Christmas in 1820.
Oh,
he died. I think December 20th, I think. And so then she said, yeah, well, I did it. I killed him.
So she took responsibility?
She took responsibility for this. The disembodied voice supposedly took responsibility for this and said, I poisoned him. And that vial that you found has the poison in it that I used to kill him. So I did that. And now he's dead.
And everybody's like, okay, that seems reasonable.
Right.
That seems like a legitimate.
This is obviously the
case closed.
Yeah, right. And so that is the story of how John Bell supposedly died due to this. So
why would anybody ever be skeptical of that? That seems pretty
Right. So, I mean, the interesting thing about the Bell Witch is that it's considered to have, kind of like primary eyewitness accounts. But nobody was actually there when this was written. So I'll go give you some backstory on this. As mentioned, they had a whole ton of kids. So it was John and Lucy Bell, and I think they had 9 kids. And of the kids that lived here in Adams area, the Red River settlement, they were all old enough to have witnessed this. None of them were babies. The youngest one was about 6 at the time everything started.
Okay.
But so he decided when he was older in life, I guess he was in his 40s or so, that he was going to write down kind of a journal of everything that had been happening during that time. As you can imagine, a disembodied voice torturing a family would be a bit sensational.
Right, yeah.
And so supposedly, if you believe the story, this was, very well documented in the area. And so
people are going to talk about it. It's going to bring up some,
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the youngest of the Bell children. He wrote this down, and it was kind of like his deathbed confession. He wanted to clear the air about everything that the community thought had happened. And I guess at that point there were gossip and rumors and about this particular case. And so he wrote this manuscript, supposedly, and gave it to his son. So this would have been John Bell's grandson.
His grandson, okay.
He took this book, and his dad said, after everyone else is dead, like all the aunts and uncles, so the 9 kids, right? After all they're done and gone, I want you to get this published. Get our story out there, get it published. Wow. And so that is supposedly how this manuscript came to be, and he called it Our Family Trouble.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And it's a short read. I mean, it's, I don't know, maybe 50 pages or something. It's not very big. So when he died, his son took this manuscript to a journalist here in Clarksville. I think he worked for the Leaf Chronicle.
Oh, hey.
Yeah. I mean, he was a journalist here in Clarksville. I don't know if it was called the Leaf Chronicle at the time, but yeah, he was one of the journalists in this area. And he saw this manuscript and decided to read it and do some research and compiled a book about that manuscript and the research he had done about the area.
Oh, wow, okay.
And he called that An Authenticated Story of the Famous Bell Witch. And that manuscript, Our Family Trouble, I think is the 7th chapter of that book.
Okay, so
if you read that book, you also read Our Family Trouble because it's a chapter of the book.
It's in the book. Okay, so you've done a lot of research on this. It seems like you know a lot about
Yeah, I'm a scientist.
Well, hey, that's
what we do.
That's what y'all do. Is that what y'all do? Okay.
That's what we do.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's almost like we research things.
So now I understand.
And yes, I've read those manuscripts. So the thing is in the beginning of Ingram's account, he talks about how he came into possession of that manuscript. And so that's where my story came from. So-and-so gave it to so-and-so. When they all died, he gets the manuscript to publish the manuscript. Right. So he wrote all that down.
Right.
So we have to take his word for it, that this actually happened, that this manuscript existed. Nobody's ever seen this manuscript.
Right, okay.
So he's having to say, yes, this actually happened. It was given to me. And then I did research and wrote this book on it.
Right.
There were some skeptics that I read about online who said that there was never any record prior to when he published that book, which was in 1894, I believe. So this is, a good 70 years after John Bell died.
Yes.
And it was about 40 years after the book had been written, supposedly. Right. That everyone in the family died and he was able to get the manuscript and then write this book around it. And so there were some skeptics online who've said, well, we don't actually know that any of the Bell family actually wrote that.
Oh.
Right. Like nobody's seen this manuscript. Nobody was there. But really, he just wanted to make this sensational story and sell a book.
Right.
So there are some skeptics who have said that. And so I was interested if that's true. And it's not. So I looked into it, and there's back during the centennial celebration of Tennessee, back in the late 1800s, there was kind of a prompt, I guess, the governor or whoever decided that every county should put together a biographical sketch of the county.
Okay, yeah.
And so the biographical sketch of Robertson County from the centennial celebration of the state includes a fairly significant story of the Bell Witch legend.
Really?
So he certainly could have gotten his idea from the book from that story, but I think that shows
That's still
that
their
that
identity.
story was in this area before he wrote that book.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's part of their identity, apparently, if they're choosing that for this.
Yes. And that was written in the 1800s prior. And, I mean, you can look at this manuscript online. Our library has it.
Wow. Oh, really?
Yeah, that's where I found it.
Well, that's a great plug for the Austin Peay Woodward Library.
Yes.
So you
use the library, kids. You will find information there.
Well, that's fascinating. So you moved here.
Yeah.
Just down the road, there's the Bell Witch Cave. You're like, well, that's interesting.
Right.
Start reading and researching, and then does something in your Dr. Mann chemistry brain start saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm starting to see something here?
So, yeah, there's a play out there. I don't know if you've ever been to the play. I'll plug the play, too, if I can.
Well, I think it's by an Austin Peay alumnus.
Yeah, so the person who wrote the play, for sure, yeah. And every October, and they didn't do it the past few years because of COVID, but prior to that, and they started back again this year, they act out, it's kind of some community theater. They do this play called Spirit about the Bell Witch story.
Wow, yeah.
And it's very good. If you're a college student with a college ID, you get a discount ticket.
Awesome.
It's a neat open-air theater out in Adams at the old schoolhouse. So I highly recommend it. They do it 6 days total in October.
I've only heard good things. I've never seen it.
It is the best darn community theater this side of the Mississippi, is what I tell people.
By David Alford, I believe, who is the Austin Peay alumnus. But
yeah, that sounds right.
we will double check that.
Yeah. It's neat, though. It's a neat experience. And so I'd seen that this was a thing, and so I started going to the play. And this was before I'd read the books.
Oh, okay.
And so I saw the play, and I mean, I just took it kind of at face value that it was just a spooky story, right? I didn't really read much into it. And then, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, I guess, there was a documentary crew putting out a movie for A&E, or a documentary series about the Bell Witch called Cursed the Bell Witch. And they contacted the university and said, do you have anybody to talk to about this? And I think it was y'all's office who said, yeah, go to the College of STEM. And then the dean of the STEM college at the time was like, send that to the chemistry department. And so then the chair of the chemistry department said, Meagan, go talk to these people. So I did. And they were like, yeah, we're just kind of interested in just talking about some of the possible science on this.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'm absolutely welcome and happy to look at this as a scientist and looking at it as a scientist. And I hadn't really done a whole lot of it before that, but they asked me to, so I did.
Great.
And so, the culmination of the story is that he was poisoned, and I'm a toxicologist, so I thought, well, let's start looking at this like it's a case study of a poisoning and see what we come up with.
Right. So for those who aren't familiar with the toxicologist, like if someone is poisoned and murdered.
Yeah, it's a study of poisons.
Studying poisons, yeah. So you're like, hey, this is my...
I can absolutely look into this as a case study of poisoning, which I hadn't done before because I'd just never thought much about it other than it just being a fun, spooky story.
Right.
But, when I started thinking about it like that, I guess I'd already kind of had some ideas, but then that made me go through and read the book and see all the symptoms. Because the play, obviously, is based on the book, but it can't cover all...
Can't cover everything. You got 2 hours.
Right, yeah. So I read through the book and I was like, oh yeah, we've got something here. This is interesting. Yeah, so Adams, Tennessee has 1,400 people in it, I think. It's less than 2,000 people that live in Adams, Tennessee. So this documentary team came and found probably the only chemist trained in toxicology in the country who knows anything about the Bell Witch.
Well,
so that worked out.
That worked out, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now they've got it on their sign, right? Coming into town only. No? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, they should.
No, they should. Home of Dr. Meagan Mann. No.
Right. But, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, toxicology, this is like a 19th century CSI in a way. We're looking at, wait a minute. This has all the signs of poisoning that could, be done by a human. Maybe there's holes in this witch story.
So my interest in this was, if I can validate part of the story by coming up with a reasonable toxin that makes sense based off what they wrote,
right?
Then maybe that validates other parts of the story.
Oh, okay.
If they didn't make up 100% of it, kind of makes you wonder.
So, you've done this work.
Yeah. So I looked into it a lot. I read a lot.
Yeah.
I looked at things. Again, used a library. I had to make a couple of assumptions. And the big one is that the manuscript Our Family Trouble is an actual record of what happened to John Bell.
Oh.
You kind of have to make that assumption.
Right.
It either, the medical symptoms and things like that, they either happened or they didn't.
Right.
Right. So I had to make the assumption that they did to look into this.
Yeah.
It's a big assumption, but if they did happen and there is a reasonable explanation that explains those symptoms, then, that kind of helps back up the fact that this probably actually did happen to him. So I started looking into it from a couple different areas. The manuscript goes into a lot of, very paranormal things, like his feet would have his shoes fly off, and they'd tie them on, and they'd fly off again, and they kept hearing scratching on the bedpost, like rats were gnawing on it, but there were never any rats found. Things like that. So some really spooky paranormal things that, obviously I can't touch.
Right,
There's nothing I can say or do to substantiate a disembodied voice. I mean,
you can't, yeah.
I wasn't there. I didn't record it. It is what it is. But he did have a lot of medical symptoms, and so they wrote these down. And a lot of them sounded very neurological. And so there are a lot of neurotoxins out there, a lot of heavy metals. I had to make an assumption that the poison that supposedly killed him, so assuming it was actually a poison, and that he was actually poisoned to death, assuming that that's all, like I said, if you assume those details in the story are as close to an accurate record as we can get.
Right.
So I made the assumption that it had to be a poison that was known in 1817 when the story got started, because I don't think that somebody's going to be poisoned by something that was discovered in 1955.
Right. You've got to put yourself
back in 1817.
You got to go back to 1817 and what they were
We didn't
using.
know as much of the periodic table back in 1817.
Right.
So that knocks out half the elements there. And one of the things is that he fell into this stupor. He got very sick, and one morning you just couldn't get him up out of bed, and he was just in this coma, stupor type situation. They're like, "Come on, Dad, get up," and he's like, no, and they couldn't rouse him, and so he'd been under the guidance, or under, I should say, the care of a physician here in the area who had given them some medicine for his spells that he was having. And so one of the children went to go to the cupboard to get the medicine to give to Dad in the stupor, and they found this bottle there that they didn't recognize. And they said, here's a bottle. And the voice was like, yeah, that was me.
That was me. Oh my gosh.
That was it. Gave a bunch of it. He's going to die now.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so they took this bottle and they described the contents of the bottle in some detail. It was a smoky, dark-colored liquid in a dark-colored vial. It had odor to it, but they don't really say what the odor was. They gave some to a cat, and then the cat died real fast.
Oh, okay. So I'm thinking that might be some sort of poison.
It might be a poison, yeah. And I teach my toxicology students. This big plug for biochemical being talked about in the semester, next spring semester,
Spring semester 2023.
I'm offering toxicology again.
Really? That sounds, well, we can talk about that later, but that sounds like an amazing class.
So I'll plug that. But yeah, I talked to my class in there about how pretty much everything will kill a cat. They have a different metabolism than most other mammals. And so that's why if you have cats, you have to be careful about houseplants and things like that.
Right, I've heard that. Poinsettias and...
like everything will kill a cat. They killed this cat with this stuff in the bottle. And then they're like, well, that's a poison. So they threw it in the fireplace.
Yeah.
And then this giant blue flame shot up. And I mean, that sounds very magical, right?
Yeah, that sounds, I'm kind of getting a little chill bumps
right
now.
Yeah, but you've seen fireworks before.
I have, yes.
So we can make colored fire very easily.
Oh, you're right. So that is a thing.
That's totally a thing.
And so the fireworks are
not
not
as magical.
witchcraft. Okay,
no,
thank
fireworks are not witchcraft.
Okay, so we've got that.
They are chemistry. So certain elements have the ability to turn fire colors.
Wow.
Some of them turn it orange, some of them turn it yellow, some turn it blue. And so I was like, well, what turns a fire blue? And I was very liberal in that definition. I included blue, green, and purple, and thinking, I mean, when he wrote it, he was experiencing things that he was talking about when he was 6 years old.
Right.
But I mean, let's be honest here. If you're going to have a family where a ghost killed your dad, when that happens, you're going to keep talking about that past 1820. Like, I don't think that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty vivid. That's going to stick with you. It's
going to stick in the family history,
probably
right?
talk to somebody if that happens.
Yeah. So he wrote that down, and I looked up those different elements that'll do that, and arsenic is on that list.
So arsenic will turn a color if
it turns fires blue.
Turns fires blue.
Yeah. It's also really good at killing people.
Good at killing people.
It's really good at killing cats.
And this is not a plug for arsenic. We're just saying.
No, don't take arsenic.
So
it was very widely available at the time. They used arsenic for all kinds of stupid stuff, like, here, would you like some skin cream with arsenic in it? It'll turn you nice and pale.
Oh.
It kills you. They were like, and if you don't want to put the skin cream on, you can also use it to kill rats. It's great for that.
Okay, because it is a poison.
It's a great poison.
Right, so...
King of poisons and poison of kings is what arsenic has been called.
Oh,
it's been known since antiquity as a great way to kill people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the Mr. Bell succumbs to his illness, his death. You've been able to, based on this writing, see...
Yeah, he was having a ton of neurological symptoms. When they were described, a lot of them were neurological in nature, and arsenic is a neurological toxin, a neurotoxin.
So it'll affect the way...
your brain and your neurons.
So
he kept having like weird twitching and all these kinds of strange issues. Dysphagia, he was having trouble swallowing. It's a symptom of arsenic poisoning. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense with arsenic. And you also have to look like historically... Arsenic has been used by a whole lot of people to kill a whole lot of people. Like, that's not unusual.
Right.
Like, this would not be the only case study of someone being killed with arsenic. Right. Like,
it's
it was bad enough that they actually started writing laws specifically to punish people who were guilty of poisoning others with arsenic.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like, specifically for arsenic.
Right. It was such a problem that they made very specific laws for it.
Well, okay, well...
Because not everybody who was poisoned died. So, it was like, well, if you tried to kill someone with arsenic...
Right.
Now you have these laws in place.
Right. Don't do that.
Don't kill people with arsenic.
Don't kill people with arsenic.
Right.
So, from your investigations, we've come with that arsenic, which we've learned is bad
Arsenic is bad.
for humans, is likely...
It's great if you're trying to poison things. It's
Right.
a great rodenticide if you're trying to get rid of rats in your house back then.
You're right. Great rodenticide.
Widely available.
You could probably go down to the 7-Eleven, get some,
Right.
whatever the equivalent of that in
Yep.
1817.
Yeah, little trade stations and
Little
things
trace
like
station.
that.
You got any arsenic?
Right.
Like, are you going to kill somebody with it?
Well, like, are you wanting like the skin cream arsenic or like the rat killing arsenic?
Right.
I guess we can just give you both. See which one
right. So
fits your needs better.
I have a 5-foot rat that I need to get rid of.
Right.
They're like, oh, here's... So would they have had this around the house?
Probably.
Probably. So
I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there.
you weren't
but
there, right? So
it was super common back then. I'd say
common.
every house probably had it back then.
So as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking John Bell was killed by arsenic. I mean, I'm obviously not a detective.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there.
We weren't there.
I haven't been able to analyze him
Right.
or his remains or the ground that they were on or anything like that. But I mean, it sounds like a likely possibility is what I'll say.
Well, it's just a great way to take science, to take chemistry, and to see you're looking at the symptoms that he's exhibiting. You're looking at the blue flame.
Mm-hmm.
We've got all these things that terrified me as a kid and made me tell my parents, I don't want to go to the Bell Witch Cave. Why do you keep pressing
here's
for
the
this?
question is, who gave him the poison?
Who gave him the poison?
Because I don't know.
You don't know. Could it have been
The ghost?
the ghost? So we're not here to disprove the ghost. We're just saying how he died.
I cannot neither confirm nor deny
neither
that there was a
confirm.
ghost that poisoned John Bell.
So this is showing how science opens up all these possibilities.
So, I mean, it's very possible that he was poisoned by... I can't explain this weird disembodied voice
right.
that supposedly so many people heard.
So many people heard, and it's great at Halloween time to talk about.
It's definitely a fun... And so
Yeah.
here's the thing, and people have asked me over the years, do you believe that the Bell Witch existed? Was this ghost real? And I always say that, it's a lot more fun to believe that she was.
Right.
Sometimes it's more fun to suspend your disbelief and say, yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
It was fun. We don't know what killed him. I mean, we have no idea.
Yeah.
I think it was probably arsenic. I don't know who killed him. I don't know who poisoned him. I can't explain any of the other weird stuff that they supposedly say happened. I can't even say whether or not this weird stuff that they say happened actually happened. Right?
Right.
Because there's nothing scientifically I can do to explain this disembodied voice in the house.
Yeah.
But I can explain why some liquid that causes a blue flame could kill someone.
Right. That's something we can do.
I can definitely attest to that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The disembodied voice, that's probably another episode when we can find...
You're going to have to
Yeah.
get the psychology professors in here to talk about people hearing voices.
Right. Or back to the library.
Back to the library. Right.
Which we cannot attest to enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think you're going to be presenting this to the community again.
I am.
You've done this before, and it's been very popular. So when are you doing that?
The event is going to be at 6:30 on Tuesday, October 25th in the Sunquist Building, room E106B. Festive dress encouraged.
Oh,
so if
no
you
way.
want to show up in costume, I think that's fantastic.
Will you be in costume?
Absolutely.
As-
Absolutely.
Are you going to give that away, or is that a surprise?
No.
Right.
No.
Okay.
No.
So we can't reveal that yet.
No, but I'll be spooky.
You'll be spooky.
I'll be spooky.
All right.
You can be spooky too. You guys can all be spooky.
We will all
Come
be
and
spooky. Will the Bell Witch be there? Do we know?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Supposedly, if you hear the legend, she's kind of always everywhere that people are talking about her. So,
Oh,
that's
not what I need to hear right now.
This is a pretty old creepy house.
Have you not heard everything I've said about being afraid of the Bell Witch? And so why would you drop that at the end?
Yeah,
We would have made this a shorter podcast.
I will also point out that at that time of night, there is free parking on campus, so people don't have to stay away thinking they won't be able to find a place to park. So,
Excellent.
right, that's after they stop patrolling. I think that's at 5 o'clock. So
it's a great way to come to campus and experience, the holiday.
have some fun Halloweeny stuff.
Fun Halloween stuff.
And I will talk a lot more details about some of the other stuff,
Yeah.
some of the rest of the science. This was a very brief overview because I don't want to bore people to tears. But I got pictures with that. The lecture will have pictures.
Pictures and
animations.
Oh my gosh.
Actual dates.
Yes, I will be there dressed as a frightened 45-year-old man. So that will be it. So thank you again. We appreciate it.